The Hugo Boss suit on that mannequin has a history most people have never been told. Hugo Boss is one of the most recognized fashion brands on the planet. You've seen it in shopping centers, on mannequins, in airport terminals. It signals a certain kind of success, a certain kind of taste. But before it dressed Wall Street bankers and Hollywood actors, Hugo Boss dressed something else entirely. In 1934, Hugo Ferdinand Boss received contracts to manufacture uniforms for the SS, the Hitler Youth, and the Wehrmacht. He had joined the Nazi Party 3 years earlier. His factory used forced labor, including Polish workers and French prisoners of war. That's the foundation on which one of the world's most successful fashion empires was built. And right now, nearly a century later, the brand is making the same kind of compromise it always has. Not with a political regime this time, but with something that matters to every man who's ever bought one of their suits. Quality, identity, trust. This is the story of Hugo Boss, a brand that has always known how to survive, and a brand that has always been willing to pay whatever price survival demanded. Hugo Ferdinand Boss was born in 1885 in Metzingen, a small town in southwest Germany. He trained as a tailor, and by 1924, he had opened a small clothing factory producing workwear and uniforms. Then, the Depression hit. By 1931, Hugo Boss was declared bankrupt. The factory was nearly gone, the business was nearly gone, and the man himself was staring at financial ruin. That same year, he joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party. His membership number was 508,889. Whether it was ideology or survival calculus is something historians still debate. What is not debated is what came next. In 1934, the Nazi Party awarded Hugo Boss contracts to produce uniforms for the SS and the Hitler Youth. Wehrmacht contracts followed. The factory was revived. The business was saved. To meet production demands, the factory employed forced labor. Workers were brought in from occupied Poland and France, people who had no choice, people who worked under coercion. After the war, Hugo Boss faced denazification proceedings. He was found guilty of being an activist and supporter of National Socialism, fined 100,000 Reichsmarks, stripped of his voting rights, and barred from running a business. He appealed. The fine was reduced. He died in 1948. The brand didn't. What happened next is one of the more remarkable stories in fashion history. His son-in-law, Eugene Holy, took over the company and made a deliberate strategic pivot. In 1950, Holy secured the company's first orders for men's suits, civilian tailoring rather than military production. By 1970, the first suits were being sold under the Boss name. Holy steered the brand away from its wartime identity and toward something entirely different: the European power suit, built on the tradition of structured menswear that Savile Row had long defined at the top of the market. Through the 1950s and 60s, the brand rebuilt quietly. Then, in the 70s and 80s, something shifted. Hugo Boss became the suit. Not a suit, the suit. Much of the credit for that iconic silhouette belongs to Werner Baldessarini, the designer who shaped the Boss aesthetic through the 1980s and 90s. Structured shoulders, slim lapels, a clean European cut. It was Baldessarini's vision that translated the brand's tailoring ambition into something the market actually wanted to buy. This was the era of boardroom power, of financial ambition as a cultural virtue. Men who wanted to project success reached for a specific silhouette. Hugo Boss delivered all of it at a price that felt premium without being out of reach. The brand planted itself at the intersection of aspiration and attainability. You didn't need to be a billionaire to wear Hugo Boss. You only needed to want people to think you might become one. By the late 1980s, it was the definitive suit brand of the era. It dressed the men who moved money, and it dressed the characters Hollywood built its ambition fantasies around. The association was so complete that wearing the name became its own kind of statement. In 1993, the company went public on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. By the 2000s, it was operating in over 120 countries, generating billions in revenue. The factory boy from Metzingen had, posthumously, built an empire. And that's when the second compromise began. Somewhere in the early 2000s, Hugo Boss started making the same kind of decision its founder had made in 1931. Not the same decision in moral terms, the politics are not comparable, but the instinct was identical. The willingness to sacrifice integrity for short-term survival has always been there. The first sign was distribution. Hugo Boss began expanding aggressively into department stores. More stockists meant more revenue, but it also meant the end of exclusivity. The brand that once felt aspirational started appearing on sale rails alongside mid-market competitors. Then came the brand split. In 2017, Hugo Boss divided itself into two labels. Boss would be the premium line. Hugo would target a younger, more casual consumer. The logic made sense in a spreadsheet. In practice, it fractured the very identity that had made the brand powerful. Men who had grown up equating the name with a specific kind of seriousness, with the suit as a symbol of earned authority, suddenly found the same label attached to oversized hoodies and trainers. Then came the quality. Hugo Boss suits today aren't built the way they once were. At the premium end of menswear, the benchmark has always been full canvas or at minimum half-canvas construction, where the chest interlining is hand-stitched to the fabric in a way that allows the suit to drape, breathe, and mold to the wearer's body over time. The fabric matters too. Suits worth the name are typically cut from Super 100s or Super 120s wool, often sourced from Italian mills in Biella or Prato. Hugo Boss suits today are predominantly fused, meaning the chest interlining is bonded with heat and adhesive rather than stitched. After enough wear and dry cleaning cycles, fused suits bubble. They lose their shape. This isn't unique to Hugo Boss. The entire mass-market suit industry moved this direction, but Hugo Boss isn't priced as a mass-market brand. It's priced as a premium one. And the brands that haven't made that compromise, Canali, Zegna, Brioni at the top end, even Suit Supply at a lower price point, are increasingly where informed buyers are going instead. Those brands have held the line on construction standards. Hugo Boss, at its current price point, largely hasn't. Manufacturing has shifted offshore, Turkey, Vietnam, countries where labor costs allow margins that a German factory couldn't sustain. That sits uncomfortably against a price tag that still signals European craftsmanship. The brand spent a decade chasing youth culture, partnering with streetwear labels, running campaigns built around aesthetics that had nothing to do with what had made Hugo Boss worth buying. The younger consumers it was chasing already had their own brands, and the older consumers it had always owned started looking elsewhere. In 2024, Hugo Boss reported declining brand heat among its core demographic. Revenue targets were missed. The company announced a restructuring, a pushback toward premium positioning, an attempt to remind the market of what the name once meant. It's a familiar move, a brand in trouble reaching back toward its heritage to restore credibility. The problem is that the heritage, all of it, including the parts the company would prefer remain unexamined, belongs to the same story. Hugo Boss commissioned a historical report in 2011, acknowledging its founder's role in the Nazi regime. The company issued a formal apology, funded research, and did the public-facing work of confronting that past. And then it went back to selling suits. There is a version of this story that is simply about a brand in decline, a company that lost its way, another casualty of the cultural shift away from formal dress. That version is true. But there is another version, one where the through line is not just fashion, but character. Where a brand built on the decision to survive at any cost has always defaulted to that same instinct when threatened. In 1931, survival meant joining the party and taking the contract. In 2017, survival meant splitting the brand and chasing a generation that would never buy in. Both times, the product suffered. Both times, the identity was compromised. Both times, the name on the label stayed exactly the same. Hugo Boss is still there, still in the shopping centers, still on the mannequins, still signaling something to the men who buy it. The question is what exactly that something is now.